Once again, we are back on Boond Soch की ttalk train of thought with a series of an episode with Mr. Gopal Mishra, who is a senior manager in ERP with Hpcl. So welcome back to this ttalk Boond Soch ki show. And now, in fact, having an experience with Tata Motors and 17 years by being part of a public sector, that is Hpcl. Now, in fact, can you throw some light for our target audience on the business process mapping, what it is all about?
So business process mapping is basically the mapping of all the business processes that any company has. Now there is a very plainly put definition, which basically means that when you have different processes in business, let us say sales, how your sale functions. Now sales of one company would be very different from sales of another company. So how sales works, what are the different steps while we are doing sales. In manufacturing, what are the steps? Manufacturing, so there is production planning, there is manufacturing, the steps in manufacturing, how do we do procurement and inventorying. So all of these processes are slightly different from one company to the other company, very different from one industry to the other industry. So when we map this, what happens is we have a clear outline of all the processes that we do in our company. That helps in a lot of ways. One is, now we can compare it to any other company. Now we can compare it to other industries. And this process called benchmarking is where we get we can derive a lot of value. We can change our processes. We can adopt the best practices. We can also improve upon the best practices. There could be cases where our practice is better than the industry, same as the industry, or inferior to the industry. And anytime you get an opportunity to improve is where you can always choose that process. So in business process mapping, that is the first step, where we map the entire business processes that we have in our company or any other company. After that, we start the designing of the to-be processes. The past processes that we have been running, called the as-is processes, are the base from where you start. And now you design the future processes. While designing the future processes, the easiest thing to do is to retain the existing process. Everybody is comfortable with it.
Right.
That is the status quo. Nobody has to change anything.
Right. For the same steps.
But that doesn't add any value at all. This exercise helps in understanding what we are doing. So we also understand what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong. And that gives an opportunity for us to change. And that is where the change management comes in. So you change the processes, the future processes, the to-be processes as we call it, and create a new business blueprint.
Nice.
For this, the processes have to change.
Correct.
The software has to change. The hardware may also require some change.
Correct.
But the most important is that the people have to change.
People have to change.
Which is the most difficult part of it.
Correct. And then when we talk in terms of designing the future business process, like with your experience in Hpcl, can you throw some light for our target audience, please?
So basically, when you're designing the future process, you think from different perspectives. First is, how difficult is it going to be for the user? Whether it is going to consume less time or more time. What are the advantages or disadvantages of any new proposed process or process that you are proposing compared to the existing one or the industry standard? What benefits are these processes or these changes going to bring? So we always see from the future perspective. We try to gain even small gains. If we are getting with a process change, we would like to get those gains. Gains of time, gains of speed. There could be a process change wherein you are able to deliver goods faster to a customer. And that change can actually bring in much more business. Correct. So that is a change that you should definitely adopt.
And then secondly, also like when we redesign a process, like then how should we approach it, as the cost is always a biggest factor which is there. Like, so how you can bring in change, looking at the cost factor.
So change are not only large. Of course, we get to see or talk about large changes in totality, which are more pronounced. But it is the small changes, little changes, that can make wonders for any company, can turn around a company from a loss making to a profit making company with low costs. Actually, there are many changes which do not actually require much of cost. It requires change in people have to adapt that, and for that change management is very important, implementation of change management. So with that we can manage that. Now coming to cost, yes, there could be huge cost involved in any change, and that is why there is a risk involved. So you do not make such costs, incur such costs without actually looking at the risks. So you do a risk analysis first.
I see.
Whether those costs are going to bring you benefits that are worth it, whether that is worth it or not. How much risk is there? Suppose you want to change it for a future business. So let us say I change the configuration of my refinery, which was actually thought of during the COVID time. Before the COVID time, actually people were scared of the electric car wave, and people thought of switching over to diesel. So people started making configurational changes to increase the production of diesel and reduce the production of gasoline, petrol. What happened after COVID is that the demand for diesel came down and demand for petrol went up. So there are always risks involved. You might be looking at it from the perspective of 10 years from now, but tomorrow may hit you hard. So these risks have to be looked into.
By the cost factor. Yes. Okay, and then what are the factors like which one should consider while redesigning, like?
So when again I think we discussed a bit about this process first. When we are redesigning, we think from the perspective of business as a strategy, then from the perspective of the user, and the perspective of our customer. So let's say we redesign a system, then is it going to be more difficult for the user? Is it going to increase the problems of my user or reduce the problems? Is it going to be beneficial for the user? Is it going to be beneficial for the business as a whole? Is it going to be beneficial for my customer? So if the answer to all of them is yes, then there are no questions. Of course you have to go for it. But then we always choose business first and user second. So if there are benefits for the business, you always choose that process over, even if it is creating more difficulty for the user. Difficulties are actually more of, you can say, emotional and habit based, because you are used to working in a certain way, and when things change, it is difficult to adapt. So more of these difficulties actually vanish after 6 months. And that is why the perspective of business is always more important than the perspective of user.
Great. Since you've been into the oil and gas, like where the prices fluctuate quite often, like and then there are the other multiple factors which do affect as such as like transportation, resource availability. So how oil and gas industry manage and what are the strategies? Can you throw light for target audience, please?
Okay, so that's actually a very broad question. So oil and gas industry gets this fluctuation. I think the most often and most talked about fluctuation is the crude price, which actually results in the increase in the final product price. So we definitely get some fluctuations, and there is no control that we have. It is affected by a large group of suppliers, a lot of geopolitics. But one thing that we can definitely do is manage these risks. So we make certain financial decisions to manage these risks, going for the long-term contracts, getting bigger storages for strategic storages. Then we also go for limited long-term contracts to take benefits of the small reductions in prices. Sometimes the prices reduce. So
Right.
if you have all long-term contracts, you may actually lose the opportunity.
Correct.
So you make a balance of these. Similarly, let us say for supply chain you're talking about, the cost of transportation. The transportation cost for Hpcl is actually huge, because for normal trucks, if you're bringing let's say mangoes from Ratnagiri to Mumbai, on the same truck you can sell machinery from Mumbai to Ratnagiri, or parle biscuits from Mumbai to Ratnagiri.
Right.
But that doesn't happen in case of our product, because if you're sending in diesel from Mumbai to Kolhapur,
Correct.
you cannot bring in anything else from Kolhapur in the same tanker.
Correct.
So the cost is double. And secondly, the cost adds up for the customer, so we have to reduce that. The other option that I have is pipelines, which actually Hpcl or even all the companies have been executing. There you have a huge cost, one-time cost is huge, but the running cost is quite low. But the difficulty is, if I am not able to get the benefit of that in long term, what will happen to my investment? Because that is a dead investment. Secondly, such investments are difficult to make. It's a huge pipeline running in thousands of kilometers, even at least hundreds of kilometers. So even building such, getting land from people, getting so many people to agree to run a pipeline through their fields, taking it through mountains and and valleys.
It is more challenging as such.
So this is a very challenging task, but we do that. Some areas we do not do that because the benefits are lesser. But more and more we are actually getting into that. As the prices of petroleum crude prices are going up, we are actually moving towards pipelines.
I see. Good. Now, in fact, once we look at the current scenario, what are the factors which are affecting the supply chain overall?
So supply chain overall is first of all become quite erratic actually. On one way, internet has actually helped a lot. Earlier, if you booked a car, say today, the factory will get to know after some days and then plan it. Today the factory gets to know in seconds.
Correct.
And can plan it on the same day. Any such information flow which is very fast makes the supply chain a much faster one, and so the inventory throughout the supply chain reduces. What is actually helping a company like, let's say, D-Mart or a Big Basket, that they are able to give you so low prices? It is the lower inventory levels which has actually been coming from the internet-based, the technology-based supply chain management. So that has actually resulted into a large tech-savvy warehouse coming in, whether it is Amazon or Flipkart. All of these giants are actually building warehouses which are very high-tech warehouses, wherein you can bring in material and take out material within seconds without any human intervention. Sorting, everything is done with technology. These things are actually changing the game even for the customer, because you want it now, immediately.
Correct.
So it has made the customer even more impatient and more demanding.
Correct.
And the more demanding and more impatient the customer becomes, more difficult it becomes for the industry.
Correct.
So it is a two-edged sword, of course, but then there are a number of benefits that we have actually achieved from this, for this technology coming into supply chain.
Great.
The future is going to be of that only.
I see. Great. I think thanks a lot for enlightening our target audience in terms of the business process mapping which are there, and also you have thrown some light in terms of designing the future business process and then redesigning, and also in terms of as far as the current factor which are affecting the supply chain management. I'm sure the word of wisdom from your side is going to help a lot as for the target audience which are concerned, who are trying to make their way into the project management or into an operation as such. That's what the philosophy of ttalk is all about, to give it back to society in a meaningful way. Thanks a lot for being part of this show. And if you like Mr. Gopal Mishra's episode, just go to www.ttalk.net, subscribe and like the channel, and also you can put your comment in the comment box, where I'm sure sure Mr. Gopal Mishra will try and address that. Till then, go to www.ttalk.net, subscribe and like the channel as much as you can. Thank you very much. So thanks a lot for being part of the channel. Thank you very much.